coaching. So I mean, he's either an executive coach or a life coach. I would probably peg him as an executive coach because that would be his target, but he doesn't really do like executive business coaching. So it's kind of like me, he's got a specialty. He's got a niche within his specialty. He's
Okay,
actually doing the kind of work I want to do, but he does it with different kinds of people than I do. Um, so which is
I think we are live, by the way, if you don't
okay.
mind checking yours, just
Yeah, it looks like we're live.
okay, yeah, I'm gonna welcome everyone to Quantum Leap. We're still getting a few kinks out here. I got my new system going, so I'm just gonna share on my page here. And um, my name is David Kirsten. I have my co-host Cory Knott here. And we're back with a segment of Quantum Leap where we really go over business development items, really laws of success, and we have a fairly mixed bag. I think today is going to be the last segment where we're going to preview our kind of a collaborative work. I'm technically the author, but I've gotten the ideas from a lot of places called Solopreneur, and it's really my first attempt to kind of put a framework around our show in large part, Cory, and kind of as we bring on more guests, they'll kind of fit into some of the different chapters as we'll see. But first, I wanted to introduce my esteemed co-host, Cory Knott, a visionary partnership coach. If you don't mind, Cory, just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, I am Cory Knott, and I am co-founder of Take Wing Coaching. So I do have a business partner, and I focus as an executive life business coach, specifically on business partnership. So I do a lot of, I call it strategic advisory and coaching for people who want to be in business together. They would like it to be successful, and especially if they already have a relationship outside of the business.
Okay, great. And so yeah, a lot of these ideas we've really evolved over time, and I'm gonna actually go into older episodes where we've talked about some of this stuff at length and include that in the bonus materials, and maybe we redo some of those segments. I'm not going to put up the table of contents again, but this book really runs the gamut of kind of how to be successful as a solopreneur, and I almost think it might be a little bit kind of like the driver's test for a solopreneur of if you have these things checked off and you're working on these things, then you're a lot more likely to be successful. And I did hear about one great anecdote I was listening to about my on my workout journey, and the coach Michael Matthews, maybe I'm getting his first name wrong. It slipped my mind. Says it's often just one thing that's holding you back. It might be something major, but and that's where I think kind of having a coach comes in, somebody like Cory or maybe Mike Matthews, this my executive director, to really figure on what's not working that it's getting in your way to this. And you know this book might do it, the podcast might do it, but I think a lot of times such money well spent is to really get a good coach. And Cory or I could definitely refer you in that right direction. But first I want to back up a little bit and tell you about what this book, Solopreneur, who it's for. And it comes out December 1st of this year, and it's really about having kind of a framework for all these things. I'd say the focus is marketing. That's really the centerpiece, but it's marketing as it pertains to networking. It's networking, it's video marketing, it's speaking. So it's really everything about getting out there and promoting your business, connecting with your ideal clients, some innovative ideas about the things that I've learned. And I call it kind of a series of aha moments that I've had that about things that maybe weren't working at all or weren't working so well, and how I improved upon them. And these ideas can continue to be evolved and improved. And that's what I love about this podcast, Cory, is how we continue to do that. Um,
Right.
but I did want to get Cory's reaction to that anything about it being one thing that solopreneurs have a problem with, and um, say who he thinks maybe what types of business owners might benefit from a book like this, or coaching, or a combination of it.
Yeah, I think that anyone who has is just starting a business, there's a lot of people coming out of the corporate world, the government world, and all those things. They don't really necessarily have the mindset around what it means to be a business owner, which is to be an entrepreneur, right? Is you're going to make or provide a service to people who want it, and there's a lot of things that have to be considered, not just as what your expertise is, but also how are you going to acquire customers, marketing, sales, um, what's your strategy for growth, at least initial growth, and then maybe within a few years your vision for that. So those are just things to think about. I think when I first joined BNI, and I think it's still true today, I maybe see it less because I don't see as many of these kind of people, but there was this sort of mindset of like, oh, I'll just put up a website and or put a shingle or a sign up and people will come to my business, and of course that doesn't really work that way. And so then you have to learn to be a business owner, which is not just working in your business, but on your business. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we do have a chapter on that, business processes, and we're actually going to bring Bob Arzt on to talk about that, as he may have seen, who's a master of some of those processes. And same with you and Gail, taught me a lot about business processes. And I'll just say we kind of I love that quote I put, just promoting this episode. Whatever you put out is going to come back. That's a lot, has to come back. So, what are the laws out there to success? And that's just a preview of what we're going to talk about next week, in case you want to tune in. And we may be off next week. I have to see if it's the following week, but our
I think
next episode, when we go into this, I think you're out of town next week.
I
So,
am.
but
It's the 20th anniversary, so
yeah, yeah, congratulations. So that's something to look forward to. And I'd say this book also has kind of a number of more practical laws, in large part, about if you have a good marketing strategy, or, things that aren't really as well defined, that you actually might need help with flushing out first to really show why they're a priority, and then how to get good at them, or how to get started. And that kind of brings me to my next topic that we didn't ran out of time a couple weeks ago, about speakerpreneurship. And I think this podcast is an example of, I think, being a speakerpreneur. But Cory, you really spent a lot of time looking at this and developing yourself as a speaker. But what do you think about this post-COVID world? How COVID kind of changed things, and where we are at now for speakerpreneurs in terms of using that to promote your business and gain clients?
right. I haven't looked too heavily into it. The National Speakers Association I was a member of and did their academy for a year, and I still get their emails, and they seem to have a number of people who are speaking and talking about how to earn money as a speaker. It has never been really my intention to be a earning money as a speaker so much as a way to reach potential clients. But it doesn't hurt to have that kind of thing. And I met a lot of people who were making earning money as speakers, and I I think there's either ones who are very good on stage of doing keynotes. I can't remember his name. We'll dig it up, but he's a keynote speaker. He is based out of Oakland, but now kind of travels the world doing keynotes and wrote a book on it. And I'm going to mispronounce his name, so I'm not going to say it, but it's very German and long. Um, Patrick Berger, yes. And you can find his book if you want to learn more about what it means to be a keynote speaker, because I think that that's kind of what speakerpreneurs would dream of. But I also met some very practical speakers. Angela, last name is St. George, and her specialty is speaking to dentists. And that's really all she does. She's very humorous, but she's also being able to, have that kind of seriousness that's needed for medicine. And she travels around doing, and maybe she doesn't travel as much anymore because of COVID, But ultimately, dentists have a lot of topics they need covered. They need continuing education. And so she makes it fun. She makes it interesting, but she can also cover kind of the broad topics that are going on. So she's earned good money in that industry doing, speaking to a very specific audience. And so that's always an opportunity too, is if you have some, strong specialty that already has, a good industry, you can do that. Another podcasts are an option, but most times podcasts will not pay you to come on unless they're very large podcasts and you have a very large following. So you have something to offer in return. That's not really a way to be an entrepreneur, is to pay somebody else to listen to you. But another, oh, it just slipped my mind. There was another style of that. I just had met somebody a week or two ago that I plan to meet with who does corporate education. So if you're a speaker, they will, book you into corporations. A little bit of a membership. I don't know that it pays very well, but sometimes those are good opportunities to get in and do, more significant work with teams and other things, depending on what your specialty is. Or maybe it does pay well. It depends on, again, your specialty, your expertise, but it is something of like a consulting thing and having a niche. So there are many ways to go about being a speakerpreneur, but really the one thing you've got to learn is how to speak. And if you're going to do corporate speaking, um, there are some really good corporate speaker trainers. If you're going to speak to small business owners and people like David and I, we tend to have possibly, we like a little more. It's just a different mindset. And so you do want to learn more storytelling on stage and things like that. So there's different also ways, like who is your audience you've got to define, which just goes back to marketing and strategy.
Yeah, yeah, well put. And I do see it myself, for me at least, as more of a kind of a side gig, one of all the hats that I wear. I'm
Right.
not going to turn down a speaking engagement if it's close to being the right thing, because it's just going to get you out there in front of more people. A lot of people need video, need live streaming. So if I go out there and speak on maybe podcast, starting a podcast to a
Sure.
local
Yeah.
business group, that's a great lead in to, hey, check out our podcast, check out our books, or come visit our BNI chapter. Anytime we can get out there in front of more people, it's really beneficial. But there is that big difference. I'd say probably a pretty steep learning curve to be somebody like that guy from Oakland you were saying, to get that good. It does, I think, take a fair amount of practice, or maybe just completely natural ability and then some work.
Yeah. He used to do networking groups in Oakland, and so he got good at doing that and went to a couple of those things, and then he just kind of went off to be uh, a speaker, and it looks like he's still doing that. And I would highly recommend his books. I'll give you the information, David. You can share it. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a
yeah,
little
maybe we have him on the podcast if he's from Oakland, or I'm sure my Rotary would
he
love
would
to
love
have
it.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Great. It's amazing the number of people that live in Oakland that you may not know about.
So his
Um,
his specialty is business futurism, technology trends, including artificial intelligence, blockchain, and disruptive innovation. So, if you have like, if you're a good speaker in a keynote, develop what your keynote is. And there are some really good keynote developers. Oh boy, I'll just give David a list of resources. I had one that I worked with. She does a regular Tuesday afternoon keynote speaker talk. She's very inexpensive. You get a year of, kind of group coaching for a relatively low price. Um, and I highly recommend her. She's been at it for a very long time. Um, but unfortunately, again, I'm terrible with names. So, but she comes up
yeah,
on my Facebook feed a lot because she's also 72 years old and well, not a bodybuilder, but a bikini model. So it's kind of amazing what people do to redo their lives later. And so,
yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I did want to move up to another topic here that, we're just going to touch on and maybe not get to the bottom of it, but I think it's a major theme in solopreneur, about what are some examples of fruitful collaborations for solopreneurs, and what are some things to consider in deciding what might work for you as a collaborator? I know we see all various types of these things in our B&I circles, but some people I think come to B&I, they've almost never even thought about how to collaborate with other people because they haven't had the opportunity unless you have a group. But what do you think about this as a um, just looking at the landscape out there, collaboration opportunities for solopreneurs?
Well, it depends on I mean, this is one of the things that can be a big benefit of BNI. And if you're willing to, some people get into small groups or they don't feel like there's a lot of people to collaborate with, but it's a large organization. There are plenty of people you can reach out to. Um, Fruitful collaborations. I mean, if you're in trades and finding anybody who, has what you have, um, or it really, I find that the most fruitful collaborations are where people have a niche, something that they really like to do, and then they can find somebody else who likes to do something similar but different, and how can they work together um, to do something. I mean, even just co-write articles, or start off with the simple things like what is it that we do that we can share together. I mean, if you're in BNI, you can collaborate together, go to different chapters and introduce yourselves, or go to chambers and collaborate in networking. Like I said, co-write articles, do things on LinkedIn. If that's not really your style, um, you could even put together packages. So there's times I've seen collaborations where multiple people who are in different professions, but they're somewhat related, will put together like a single business package so they can go after bigger companies. Like, hey, I'm not just a solo graphic designer. I've got a whole, video production team and, and photographer. Um, and so it gives you a little more clout with these companies that don't like to hire a bunch of different contractors, right? It's a big challenge for them. But if they hire one company, it could be, either just it usually would have to be an LLC at that point, but that could be a very fruitful collaboration. So it's almost like a partnership. That's why you want to come work with me on what that means. But it's also maybe like a strategic alliance is what we like to call it.
Yeah, I like that term. And I think it really starts too with the relationship that you have to kind of know, like, and trust that person a bit. So what might not have came to mind at first maybe comes to mind after you become kind of colleagues with that person for a while and you kind of
Yeah.
learn how to collaborate better. I'd say the other big example from BNI is power partners, and there's really no shortage of what you can do there. Kind of that starts as like a referral relationship, but a lot of times it ends up being more to that. Maybe it's like they're having a networking event, that person attends and invites a bunch of people and maybe gives them a testimonial or something. So that's kind of an example of really you're almost like not a strategic alliance of, it's a lot easier for somebody else to promote us than for us to get out there and try to do everything ourselves, so to speak. So,
Yeah, actually, where I see a good example of collaborations is with those, speakers as well. And whether you're doing it to earn money or doing it for, to get in front of audiences, a lot of speakers collaborate because everyone has different topics, right? And it's like, who else can you recommend? So there's generally speaker groups where people will help each other find speaking engagements. Because maybe somebody comes and says, hey, we're putting together, well, Gail's doing that right now. She's been helping a Filipino group put together a series, at a conference. And so she's got to pick the speakers and reject some speakers. But ultimately, it's like, recommend who you think should come speak, and then we'll review them for this. So that's a collaboration right there. Is keeping in mind who you can recommend for something. Another thing too is don't discount your competition. Competition often has, again, different people they service. I just met a transformational coach last week, and while I don't necessarily do the kind of work he does, that is kind of my intention to do the kind of work he does. And at the same time, the people he works with are not the kind of people I would work with. It's just a different energy, and I don't feel like working with that kind of energy, and he loves it. So that can be also a very powerful potential for collaboration because chances are the people I would work with would not interest him as much. I'm sure he could, just like I could work with his, but that's not, it's not serving our clients to give them something that we're not the best at.
Yeah, no, well put. And um, this kind of feeds right into that about podcasting is an example of a collaboration, and it's really
Yeah.
a subset of being a speakerpreneur. But what do you think about a podcast in terms of a business podcast as a way to collaborate? I mean, I think this is probably one of the biggest ways that I collaborate. It's not only with us collaborating on ideas, which is kind of the most one of the most exciting things for me is be able to talk about this stuff. We kind of get to the bottom or drill down on a lot of these ideas that you that we've dealt with for a while and that are important. But but then it's really inviting people on. We've done certain events, like we're going to do a year-end thing with Gail about how to get ready for the next year. We've done those conferences. So it's again, it probably won't pay for itself right off, but I think the professional development aspect of a podcast is huge, and it's not something a lot of people might realize looking at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're starting to see that with AI, especially taking over and marketing and everything else, and AI kind of takes away a lot of the authenticity. And no matter how good AI gets, it's never going to be truly authentic. And it's going to be more expensive. I think we're not seeing that yet, but that's a distraction. The point being that what you say is a great idea. A podcast as a collaboration. Everybody talks about, I want to do a podcast, but sometimes if you have somebody to work with, there's an accountability factor for one, and two, you can riff off each other, come up with things, talk about, things you've run into. So even like, two plumbers or two consultants or, whatever you do, you can have somebody that partner with on a podcast. And if you do video and break that stuff up, it then becomes opportunity for your marketing people to post that stuff on LinkedIn and other things so that you can get found. And today that's kind of referring back to AI because more and more people are searching on Google and AI is taking over the Google searches. You need to be on AI. You need to have all this content out there. So for me, it's like if somebody says, how do I work with my partner? I want them finding me. I want the Google, AI to say, well, this is, an article on it written by, and then it's got a link to my website or my article, not somebody else's, because so, the more you have out there, the more content you have out there related to your name and your business, the more likely you are going to be found.
Yeah, no, and I'd love to do some more on that. I know my uncle Kim is still really big into AI and knowledgeable on it. So we'll definitely look at having him back. If you come across anybody, we can talk more about that as well. And the last question I had for today, um, and we've really went into this at length previously, but this we have a chapter in Solopreneur on customer retention management, which is something I got from you. And this is actually a pretty long chapter in the book. I think you'll find it interesting. I kind of actually summarized a lot of our discussions that we had before, but um, what would you say? I see this as a major challenge for solopreneurs, and one, just recognizing that it's a challenge is a big thing, but then how do you address this challenge?
Say that again, the challenge of CRM.
Customer retention
Yeah.
management.
Yeah, or
So
relationship management
yeah,
or customer acquisition management, information management. Yeah, I think it's the one thing that we get sold on a lot, and it really just kind of comes down to what your business is. Um, so there's many ways to do it. Some people just start with spreadsheets. Some people it's such a big topic, but ultimately this is a good place to actually talk to a consultant who doesn't work for a CRM company and not your IT guy because they won't really know either. And when they start to go do the research, they're going to get sold by a company. But there's the CRM comes in many different shapes and sizes. There's some very generic ones, but there's also ones that, are very specific to sales. There's some to managing relationships with your existing customers or a large customer base. And there's some that do what I call information management. So if you have, let's say you're an HR expert, you can't, or anything in medicine, you need HIPAA compliance, but ultimately you're probably keeping a lot of customer records. And if you're keeping information and handbooks and all that kind of information, then you need something that actually handles information well, or at least ties to your Dropbox or whatever other tools you're using. But it keeps it safe, and it also is a great backup in the case of like a cyber attack, right? Because if somebody comes and deletes all your files, you're in big trouble unless you have good backups, which is a whole other thing. But CRM can also be, because you're tied to a much larger company at that point, keeping your data with them it's hard for somebody to come in and delete it all, which can happen. But if you're just keeping it in your Dropbox, you may not have the backups you think you have. So that's kind of getting away from it. But oftentimes, as somebody who did software for many years, people would say, I need a CRM. And it's like, okay, well, what do you need it to do? Because it's get on that list. Do not ask the CRM companies because they will claim to do everything you ask of them, and generally a lot of them don't do it well. So it's you've got to find the one that's really specific to your needs. Like I love Pipedrive for sales. If you're doing sales, Pipedrive is wonderful. There's a couple of other good sales tools, um, but they're not a good customer relationship management tool, and they certainly don't hold a lot of information. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this has changed a lot in terms of the companies that serve. I look at a company like Infusionsoft, which used to be one of the big
Now it's
companies, and
keep.
it's almost
Yeah.
like a lot of it just went out of date. I think with the decline of email, and I think there's even a more importance on relationships now, given the amount of junk stuff that people get. So, um, uh, yeah, so well,
Yeah, I've
yeah.
tried a few different things. Nimble is one that I've been trying out, and I haven't paid them yet because I just don't. It takes time. You got to set it up and really know what you want from it. And if you're doing like constant customer service, like if you are in the trades, there's probably actually some really good tools for that. But that's a different way of thinking about your customers. You got to invoice them. You got to chase them for money. There's schedule ahead and plan your employees. Um, so CRM takes some thought, and I would avoid companies like Infusionsoft or Keep or Salesforce. They're very expensive, um, and they will make offers of low cost stuff. But my experience has been they're very complicated, and even as a software guy, I struggle to make them work when there's other stuff out there that kind of runs on rails.
Yeah, no, well put. And I did just want to end with a little anecdote from Ivan Meisner yesterday, put out this new video about um, where I actually got this topic that we're going to talk more about next week about this laws of success, or what makes successful people different. And you may have seen the video, but he actually goes out and talks to entrepreneurs and college students about, okay, he asks them all the same question about what makes people successful, and they all tell him, well, goals and passion and drive and accountability, and kind of a list of stuff. But his conclusion was that people all kind of like know what it takes to be successful. I think enough to get started, but the lack is in the action about how to kind of have an uncommon approach to success. So he says that what people succeed is that they do what is not common towards success, meaning they don't give up. So his thing was about doing, six things like 10,000 times. A lot of people quit maybe at like a few hundred repetitions. And he said he was a 20-year overnight success story. So maybe you stop at year 10 or 15 and you don't get all the way there. So I loved his anecdote and his way of thinking about it, that a lot of times it's just a twist on what you're almost there, you're so close, or you were on the right path, but you just quit kind of thing.
That could be a big one. There's also, I think, for a lot of people who are more neurodivergent, like myself, it can also be, it's very challenging to be that consistent, and ideators. And so sometimes success comes more in finding people who have the, the personal power and skills that I don't have is kind of what I'm starting to think is like, it'd be good to find a maximizer, somebody who's like, okay, I get what you do. I can go, and kind of keep the consistency there. And, the success can come in many forms, but it's also sometimes getting out of your own way, and recognizing that other people can do these things better. And if you can find them, put them to work and yeah, and reward them well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of Bruce Lee, who was the topic of thought leader, how he would do those high kicks like 10,000 times in order to
Right.
master them. And it
It's a
takes
big
a
one.
certain
Yeah.
kind of person to do that many times, so a lot of those, you know, fighters and the athletes, that's what it takes to be at that level, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's Tom Petty. They talk about like some of the greatest guitarists and so on, and it's like, it seems like they just have this talent for picking it up, but most of the time it's just they play constantly, right? It's not like they just stop. It's like that's their job all day long, the rehearsal and replaying and all that. Yeah, yeah.
Great. Well, I liked ending on that, and I feel like we're kind of back a little bit in our swing of our podcast. So it's great to be back with you, Cory, and we'll resume here in I think a couple weeks' time. Let me just check the date that we are coming back here. We're off next week, but then we are back on October 21st. So we're going to do
Okay.
that episode on success principles. I'm going to put it on the calendar right now so that it'll be success principles and laws. So if you have any you want to go over, feel free to shoot them to me and we'll talk more about them. So
All right.
with
Thank
that,
you, David.
thanks for joining us, everyone.
Everyone.
David and Cory signing off for today.